Thank you for joining us here at Fair Talk by Fair Farms. My name is Amanda Higgins. Today I'm excited to be joined by our guest speaker, Kestra Bowskill. Kestra is a Human Rights Manager for the Endeavour Group. Kestra, welcome.
Thanks, Amanda. Great to be here.
Thank you. Kestra, the Endeavour Group, for those who are unfamiliar with the name, you have brands such as Dan Murphy's, Beer, Wine and Spirits, BWS. You're actually the largest retail network within alcohol supply, I suppose. What does that look like? Tell me a little bit more about that, because it's not just retailing alcohol. You do other things as well.
It's not. Another big brand you probably would have heard of is ALH Hotels. That's one of our other big brands under our umbrella. But we've got a range of others too. There's Jimmy Brings, alcohol delivery service, heaps more that sit under Endeavour Group. But in terms of, we also have Pinnacle, which is our own brand wine that we retail and also manufacture in some ways as well too. So we've got bottling facilities, we've got a small number of vineyards and wineries as well. So I think we're in that unique position as a liquor retailer. We're not just a liquor retailer, we're also a grower as well.
Yeah. So you understand the grassroots of the problem.
We see it from beginning to end. Yeah, in some ways, where for in most situations, that would be several layers of a supply chain. We can often see that from the beginning to the end of the product.
That's a good lens and good insights. That so with regard to that, so in regard to ethical sourcing in Australian viticulture, what's the current status? What's that?
I think in viticulture, in my experience anyway, versus other areas of agriculture, we're a little bit behind. I think the others have gone before us in other areas of horticulture, and I think in my experience anyway, part of that's been because most growers in viticulture are quite lower in the tiers of, say, a retailer, for example. So if you're growing grapes, by the time it gets to that product that's sold in shelf, you might not often have that commercial relationship with the retailer. It could be, you know, tier 4 of your supply chain. So I think it's taken us a while to catch up. But you'd know about the Modern Slavery Act that we have in Australia, and that compels big companies with revenues in excess of 100 mil at the moment to report on what they're doing to mitigate and manage risks in their supply chain. And that's meant that people have started to map out their supply chains further down the tiers. So viticulture's getting there. But I was reading an article last night actually from Wine Australia, and they had a really good summary about sustainable trends in wine. And they were saying, they quoted another research survey that was saying 58% of Australian consumers are saying that ESG is more important to them now than it was 2 years ago. And they're seeing an increase in intent to buy sustainable wine. And there was another report saying that sustainability is important for 2 out of 3 wine consumers across the biggest markets in the world. So it's absolutely not going away.
No, it's not going away, is it? So that as a future trend is something people are going to look for, either sustainable logos or a story behind the provenance of the product, etc.
Absolutely. I think especially younger generations, you know, you see any of that researcher reporting, and as the age bracket gets smaller, so as people are younger, their care for purchasing sustainable products with those kind of certifications is increasing. So not going away.
Yeah, gosh. So as far as becoming a trendsetter in that sector for viticulture, how can Endeavour play a part in that?
I think because, like I was saying before, we have that, we're everything from a grower to the retailer, we have those industry connections, and I think we can come at it with a whole of industry approach. And you know, the wine sector is not small. I was looking it up before. 6,000 grape growers in Australia contributing $45 billion annually to the economy.
Billion. $45 billion.
That's a massive market. So I think if we can get that right, and if we can support the industry that we you know, rely and operate in so heavily to do a good job in the ethical sourcing area, we're all going to win.
Yeah, gosh. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you sort of think, how can an industry become a trendsetter? But really, we did speak earlier about taking those lessons learnt from what mistakes have perhaps been carried out in other sectors, and because it is fairly new to the viticulture industry, how you can perhaps leapfrog some of those and make a major impact much faster.
Absolutely, and I think getting growers on board is the first thing, isn't it? It's a tough time out there for people as it is, so I think if we can bring them along in the journey, support them towards that social compliance, that's going to be good for everyone.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges in regards to social compliance in the sector? What do you see at a grassroots level there?
The main thing's labour hire compliance. So most growers, because produce is so seasonal, they're relying on their contractors or labour hire providers to supply the labour that is, for a couple of months a year, say. Traditionally, there haven't been processes in place, I think, for people to be checking their labour hire providers' compliance, including pay slips. Are they paying people properly? I'd argue most farmers or growers would want to know that their contractors are doing the right thing by the workers who are picking or pruning the produce, or grapes in this case, on their farm. But that is the biggest one. And I was looking it up too. The Fair Work Ombudsman released something back in April, so just a couple months ago, talking about how they are doing these surprise visits on farms, and that's including viticulture, so that's including vineyards that they're going out and visiting. So they know, it's no secret that there are issues with contractors, and they include things like record keeping is the main one. So are people receiving pay slips? Are they being paid in accordance with the wine award, for example? But yeah, regulators know that there's an issue out there. But yeah, that's the main one.
And is that making an impact on your growers? Because, it's hard to staff a seasonal business with permanent staff. It's just not practical.
Oh, absolutely. And the labour shortage as well too. That's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, how difficult it is to even source labour to begin with. And then if you were to impose these additional compliance obligations on your labour hire providers, there's a fear that in doing so you might lose access to labour.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is a fear, I think, not just in the viticulture industry, but also
across the board.
Across the board,
Yeah.
That's right. And when we do have a look at the transferability of labour and labour issues across hort to viticulture, the story is very, very similar.
Yeah,
it's very much the same.
Yeah.
It certainly is a tricky space to watch, because we certainly know that direct growers want to do the right thing. They want to ensure compliance, but how on earth do they charge themselves in being able to conduct that due diligence accordingly?
Absolutely, and then just having the skills and resources to do it too. I know we'll speak a bit about the pilot program we're doing with Fair Farms at the moment, but there's a big difference. I was saying before, 6,000 grape growers in Australia. There's a very big difference between a company like us that has the resources and time and people to make sure that everything's above board, or to do our best to make sure it is, versus a small or sole trader grower. So the challenges are, we all share a lot of the same challenges, but they are
the skill and the resource to be able to deal with the challenge varies wildly.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it is a tough one. So really what we could say is that labour component is what's driving the need for social compliance?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. Like I was saying before, there's so many known industry issues. So how do we tackle them? How do we make sure that the people that are picking our produce are being paid properly and treated fairly, and that sort of thing? I think that is the driving factor for sure.
Yeah, it is. So you mentioned just before, and we are going to talk about it, last year Fair Farms and Endeavour Group commenced doing a pilot project together.
Yeah.
And we were looking at working with some of your growers of various sizes in regards to onboarding and working as to how we can assist in that respect. Would you mind speaking a little bit to that and how that's gone for your guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we went and did social compliance audits across all of our vineyards in the previous financial year, just to test it out for ourselves first. And that was with a different standard. And then we thought we'll try Fair Farms. And we thought while we do that, we'll take some growers along for the journey, because we have been looking at how do we strengthen our due diligence in our supply chain in areas like viticulture, but then how do we do it in a way that our suppliers are going to see the benefit of it and come along willingly on the journey with us. Yeah, willingly. Exactly. And we don't want to impose requirements on people that are going to be so strenuous that is going to make it difficult for them to do business and that sort of thing. We just wanted to make sure we're strengthening those relationships with the people that we already work with and our supply partners. So we invited, I think it was around 6 growers in the Barossa who we initially invited to join a Fair Farms pilot program. So the idea being Endeavour would pay for it. We'd pay for your sign-up fees, your training, and then if you go all the way through to audit, we would pay for that as well too. And in exchange, the growers give us feedback about the program, the challenges, what they enjoyed, but then more fundamentally, how we could build Fair Farms into our program in a way that's going to work for growers as well too. So that just happened. As you know, we did Fair Farms audits on our own South Australian vineyards for Dorian in the Barossa, and then 2 of our growers went through the audit as well too with Fair Farm, so that was just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, nice. And so some of the learnings and some of the outcomes, obviously we mentioned that the resource to be able to deal with the challenges that come from those audits vary from business to business depending on the size. How did that look at the end of the day? Was there a willingness, do you think, to continue on in that respect? Was there an overarching benefit that perhaps maybe some of the smaller growers could see that whilst this is a pilot project, they can actually see that there's an inherent benefit to improve processes within their business? Was there some?
Absolutely, and I think that was the feedback. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and something like this will highlight the areas. I mean, a lot of what's being checked is legal baseline compliance. You know, are you complying with law? And so I think it was a good experience for growers to have that assessed. You know, am I complying with the law? And better to know as well too before a regulator comes knocking. You know, if you can fix the issues in your own backyard before someone else comes and finds them for you. So I think they could definitely see the benefit in that way. And I think for us, absolutely. So we are planning to audit all of our sites now to the Fair Farm standard, hopefully in the next financial year, but that will depend on seasonality. But I think we absolutely see a benefit. I think now it's just how can we build that into our program in a way that's fair and equitable for our growers? Because I think they do see a benefit, provided they know that they'll sell their grapes.
Gosh, and that's the thing, isn't it? I think your message has always been strengthening supplier relationships, and it has to be a win-win situation. So I know that you have got some strategies in place that as a corporate perspective you're looking at how you can develop those ongoing relationships, and perhaps you might like to explain what that looks like just from an overall point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we know, and that was our growers' feedback to us as well too, like I just said. Yes, it's worth it. It's worth investing in compliance if we know there's going to be a return on that investment. So what we have been looking at that we haven't formalised yet, but it's if we bring Fair Farms or any sort of social compliance into our own responsible sourcing program, how do we do it in a way that there is a reward or incentive or benefit for growers who partake? So whether that's in the form of it's a mandatory requirement for growers with a contract term of X amount of years, and we'll work with growers to work out what that looks like. But that's been the strategy we're looking at. But like you said, it's building those relationships. It's making sure that we are investing in the people who are investing in compliance for us.
Yeah, that's right. Because we did mention beforehand that, you know, whilst that Modern Slavery Act is applicable to businesses of the $100 million in revenue, really that compliance burden is pushed all the way down to the grower at the coalface.
Yeah.
And invariably they're the ones who have the cost attached to that as well. So I think your strategy about how you can partner with them along the way, and perhaps whether that is longer term growing contracts or whatever that might look like, or improved pricing. I hear that a lot with our growers from the retailers. They'd love to simply get a better return for their produce to help offset some of that compliance cost is really important. So
100%, and I think it's that we're in that interesting area where we know there's issues on farms and vineyards. We know there's issues with how people are treated and what they're paid and that sort of thing. But farmers are also doing it tough, you know. So how can we solve that issue without creating another one for our farmers or our growers? How can we make sure that we are ensuring workers are getting paid while also paying the people who are responsible for that cost of compliance, that in turn helps us with our program?
That's right, because that regulatory requirement falls on the big guys, but the small growers or the growers down the supply chain are the ones responsible for providing that data.
Exactly, or for implementing the programs that you've set as a big retailer. That's right.
And so it's kind of, I don't want to use the words passing the buck, but it is how do you analyse the supply chain otherwise? How do you map that to meet your obligations? And
exactly, so that we have the data that we need and we're satisfied that our suppliers are doing the right thing while also not burdening them unduly in the process. But I mean, there's other ways that when we did the Fair Farms audit just recently on our Dorian vineyard, we had a contractor that was found to be doing an amazing job. So in some ways it's really cool when you can go to your supplier, not, oh, we found this issue, you need to remediate it, but like, great work, you know, thank you for doing the right thing, and celebrating that as well.
I think you're spot on, because what we do want to see more is celebrate the wins, celebrate the good practice. Don't just always focus on the negative. Yes, acknowledge that there's stuff that needs corrective action. However, don't also downplay what's actually being done well. And champion that.
Yeah,
it's the only way you'll get a continuous
improvement. Reward it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to hear. The smaller guys that went through the audit process with you, what were some of their bigger challenges?
I think the main ones was just resourcing. Okay. You know, it was the time, not just to complete the audit, but to prepare, to make sure that you have everything in order. You know, we were talking with the growers afterwards, and we thought about us versus a smaller grower, and us at Endeavour, you know, we've got a health and safety person who was there for the audit. We've got me, the human rights manager, that can do the human rights side of things. You know, we had our lead viticulturist, we had people in culture, we had a team to support this audit. And then you look at other growers who sometimes it's just them. You know, how are they meant to implement the same processes that we do? So I think the big learning for us was, how can we make sure that we're better supporting and giving the resources to the growers that they need, because we have the resources to do so. But I think that's where Fair Farms has been really good, and that's what we enjoy about Fair Farms anyway, is the training suite that comes with it. You offer those template policies and procedures and things that people might not have the resourcing or HR department to implement themselves. So
that's exactly right. I think our manual's been of benefit to a lot of people. Which, you know, if you don't have a sophisticated HR department, it's a great starting point rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. It really is. It's one of the biggest challenges is documentation. I don't think people go into growing grapes or growing produce to be able to write up more paperwork.
To write a child labour policy or
freedom of association or something along those lines. That's exactly right. But I think you hit the nail on the head in regards to strengthening relationships and being there to support the growers all the way through. And I'd like to think that Fair Farms does the same with our membership, is supporting on that journey and trying to take the sting out of compliance. We know it's only going to perhaps increase as to, you know, what we've discussed with the Modern Slavery Act review. What do you know of that's come through as proposed?
So a few things have been proposed and implemented. We're going to have the Commissioner, so the Modern Slavery Commissioner, but then the review of the Modern Slavery Act, which occurred, I think they made about 30 recommendations to government. So we're waiting on which, if any, the government implements by way of law. But one of them was to reduce the reporting threshold from companies bringing in $100 million of revenue a year to 50. So if that's the case, we're talking about, and we're talking revenue, not profit. So that's going to bring in a lot more companies in Australia that are going to need to report, if it is the case that goes ahead and becomes law. So that's smaller businesses that are going to be looking at this thing as well too. So by reducing that threshold, it's actually going to cast the net a whole lot wider across businesses and the supply chain. So whilst there might be, you know, a handful, well maybe not a handful, but I imagine that there's a significant number of businesses in Australia that are $100 million turnover, it will really open the door. Massive.
And those suppliers to those businesses will get caught up in that as well. So it's not going anywhere. It's only going to increase. So I think we need to work out how we can actually assist and best partner with businesses to make that compliance journey as stable as they can.
Absolutely.
So we open up our discussions for our viewers when they register, and we have some questions that have been submitted.
Great.
One of those from one of our viewers is, what's going to happen if you're introducing social compliance in viticulture? What's going to happen to the shelf price of wine?
Oh, it's such a good question. The good news is I think we're a fair way off that anything like that being likely, but I think if we do it right, it shouldn't impact them at all. You know, what I was saying before, if we look at how do we introduce a social compliance program that says for growers with long-term contracts, so that's embedded into their cost of business, and therefore nothing's passed on to anyone. It's worth their time. Costs shouldn't change for consumers. But also we were looking, and I know we were talking about this before, the Fair Farm certification scheme, you either go from 1 year to 3 years. So as people get better at social compliance, it should be, say, 3 years between their compliance audits, and that's not a big cost to be passed on to anyone. So I think if we can do it right, there shouldn't be any costs passed on to consumers.
No, well, that's good to know. Yeah. We certainly know that the wine industry is struggling at the moment in regard to great pricing. That's a really tough.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's what we were talking about before, not passing the cost unduly onto people that are already struggling.
Yeah. It's a tough place for all produce growers, I think, at the moment, not just wine, but hort as well. It's one of those things. So being able to absorb that compliance cost within the cost of doing business as a normal would be fabulous, to think that that's an end result rather than actually coming out of revenues.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And I mean, there's already issues or cost considerations in other areas too. Like one thing I was going to talk about, when we did the social compliance audits a year or two ago in our own vineyards, we lost 2 labour hire providers. So when we went out and said, we want to see your pay slips, time sheets, rights to work, they opted to leave site rather than do business with us. So if we're not doing it right, or if we imposed a compliance program on growers where they lose access to their labour by questions like that, that does no good for anyone.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
So something that Fair Farms has done is opened up labour hire certification. So
we're so excited about that.
Well, so are we, because we really know that our grower members are desperately trying to do the right thing. But we also know that not all labour hire providers can be tarred with the same brush.
Yes.
And we would like to think that a certification process is then a stamp of approval and a bit more of a robust process to help take out some of that due diligence pressure off the growers. Do you see that as a win-win in that?
I'm stoked with that.
Okay.
I think that's been the feedback from our growers as well too, not just in this Fair Farms pilot program, but you remember when we hosted with the grower engagement session with growers in the Barossa, so that was prior to the Fair Farms trial. And that was the feedback they were giving us. They were going, if we don't have the resources or time to check that our labour hire providers are compliant, we would love a list, you know. If you could give us a list of here's the approved suppliers, it wouldn't be approved, you know, we're not going to mandate anyone to use a particular supplier, but if they could know that who they were engaging has been checked by a third party externally, that solves their problem, that solves our problem, because we know they're using a labour hire company that has been adjudicated to a standard that we accept. So we're so excited by that.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really tough because, you know, from the licensing requirements for labour hire within Australia, we've only got 4 licensed states and 4 unlicensed states.
Yeah.
And unless there are compliance officers out in those regulated states, day in, day out, across absolutely everything, you're still going to get some unscrupulous operators. So
absolutely,
I think, and there's some of the feedback for us has been, as if you're introducing a labour hire certification, is that cost then just going to get passed on to the grower if the labour hire provider has a compliance cost attached to it too?
Yes, true.
But it's a tricky business, isn't it? Because it's, well, how do you then prove and demonstrate you're doing the right thing unless you've had somebody audit you impartially?
Yeah.
How do you demonstrate that evidence?
And like we're saying, you don't know what you don't know. There are some things that will come up that will surprise you.
Oh, that's exactly right. You might think everything is perfect on farm, but all of a sudden it's not.
And better you find it out yourself, like I was saying before someone else comes knocking.
Yeah, that's right. And we certainly know that viticulture has been on the Fair Work Ombudsman's radar. They did some blitzes down in Tasmania, I think it was February, and viticulture was one of the
I think in the Yarra Valley as well.
And then the Yarra Valley too. Yeah. So it's not going to go anywhere, and it's only going to become more prevalent.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's right.
The more that we can help identify what some of those problems are within an ecosystem before it gets into a Fair Work or before it becomes a major issue.
That's right.
And like it could be an ignorant and innocent mistake.
Oh, and I would hazard guess a lot of the time it is, you know, an innocent mistake, or someone, like we were saying before, not having the resources to understand updates to the Wine Industry Award or whatever relevant award it might be.
Yeah, that's right. So Kestra, I think it's really amazing that the approach that Endeavour Group takes with their suppliers is one of that long-term partnering. So I think it's a great show as a corporate major corporate, that you have such a commitment to that supply chain to assist them through. So hats off in doing that, because, you know, a lot of the time it's more so looked upon the fact that that responsibility is just that individual business's responsibility, but you very much take it as a shared journey.
Oh, it is. And I think one of our key strategic pillars at Endeavour Group is partnerships for growth. How do we support our suppliers? You know, the wine industry is doing it tough at the moment, but what about when there comes a time when they're not and we need our suppliers? You know, how have we supported them so that they stay with us and build those long-term relationships?
Yeah, building loyalty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we want them to want to work with us as well too. Yeah.
Of course, that's what business is all about, isn't it? You want to be in a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Well, Kestra, I would like to thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us. Is there any last minute insights you might like to share that through your readings and through your exploration with Endeavour, what's social compliance for some of your growers? Any last minute thoughts?
No, just that I think and I hope that we can work together as an industry for this. You know, our end goal or something we'd love to see is, say, a voluntary code of practice, you know, across the retailers or different industry groups, where we say this is the base level of compliance that we're going to expect of our suppliers. Can we all agree on something similar so that we're not imposing different requirements for different growers or different businesses across the industry? And I guess just if you are a supplier of Endeavour and you have any issues, please let us know. Or if you want to talk about it, or you have ideas or anything like that, you want to be part of the Fair Farms program with us before we start introducing anything that might be a requirement, let us know and we'd love to help.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. It's a great opportunity for growers out there. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, wonderful. Good on you. Well, I take my hat off to you for such a powerhouse of a company adopting such a pragmatic approach with the supplier relationships. So thank you. Thanks, you for your
Amanda.
time today. Appreciate it. And a big thank you to all of you who have joined us online today. We appreciate your time as well. And until next time, thank you. And that's us. See you next time on the next episode of Fair Talk by Fair Farms.